Okay, so can you tell me a little bit about the business? Why did you start Swan Innovations?
Yeah, so our mission is really to make EVs more accessible and empower people to be more energy independent. We do this by reducing the barriers to EV adoption and provide large scale energy storage solutions through the network that we create. We help communities to participate in the grid and store their own energy with the EVs to strengthen the environment around EVs and giving power back to the people, literally. We also want to address challenges we saw pain points in inner city dwellers having access to be able to even charge an EV. So it makes owning an EV more difficult. And on top of that, we are continually seeing rising energy costs. We want to help individuals offset the cost of their EV because we know that these vehicles are usually more expensive than conventional vehicles. And we want to encourage people to have more sustainable transport solutions.
So can you provide a little bit of context about your backgrounds and what I guess you're both respectively bringing to the company in terms of your expertise?
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Declan. I'm an engineer, electrical engineer, with particular expertise in the power industry. I'm deeply passionate about creating electric car charging infrastructure and committed to creating sustainable and efficient EV grid solutions.
I'm Colin. I'm an MBA graduate and I also have a background in engineering as well. I possess a unique combination of technical, business knowledge, and imagination. And I'm really dedicated to improving the built environment and using that in creating a sustainable solution to help others. Therefore, leveraging my diverse skill set to make a really meaningful impact in the industry.
So what's the plan? What's the business plan for the next 12 months and longer term?
So overall, it's really the goal is to make it easier for people to use electric vehicles and be more in control of their power and transportation. And we really want to achieve this by using a successful car sharing business model, which has already been proven, to onboard large numbers of customers. And then in the very, very near future, we plan to buy and sell electricity on the grid using our large pool of all electric vehicles that we've created. And this allows us to maximize our profits for both of our company and more importantly, give back to the vehicle owners in return for supporting the grid. Now, overall, we're working towards creating a more sustainable and convenient way for people to use electric vehicles, while also benefiting from energy trading opportunities.
So there's two pieces to the business. There's car sharing, and then there's the energy, the virtual power plant, side of it. So are you going to basically attack the market on both fronts right out of the gate, or how's that going to look as you sort of build the business and scale it?
Yeah, sure. So we want to use car sharing is a really well proven business model in terms of getting customers on board. But we do see the challenges faced with that business model. So what we want to do is start by launching our electric vehicle car sharing to then create a network that will then support the energy trading part of it down the road, 24, 36 months away. We still see some things that need to get in line for that to happen. And so we want to really have that network established so that once the technology and things are ready, the infrastructure is ready, we can then switch it on really quickly so that we can give more value back to our customers through storing the energy within the vehicles.
So it's initially building the car sharing fleet and then moving into the energy side of the equation.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. So we want to start with the both with a hybrid model. So both Swan owning vehicles, having our own fleet, but also having the opportunity for customers to have their own electric vehicles on our network as well, to really try and encourage maximum number of vehicles on the network that are ready then to be able to use that in the future for power storage. Correct.
And why would somebody want to loan their car to the Swan fleet if they've got an electric vehicle?
Definitely. So the way that Swan is designed is we took the car sharing model, which your car generally sits for 95% of the time. And then we're like, okay, we'll add car share to that model. and essentially allow it to use it more than 5% of the time. So a car generally sits stationary for 5% of the time. Rolling into that, beyond that, once we attach the energy model to it, while it's parked, we're basically using it now from instead of 5%, maybe to 20% of the time, we're actually using it from like 95% of the time. So therefore, it becomes an asset versus a liability. Now, most of the time when a car sits there, it's a liability, right? Because it does nothing, it's not making you money. But now that we've attached the car share, you can rent the vehicle, right? Or you can actually sell electricity back to the grid, get paid for your energy. Then all of a sudden that car is actually starting to generate revenue instead of just cost revenue each week.
I just wanted to add as well, with electric vehicles, we still see them to be more expensive than conventional cars because of the fact it's got a battery within it as well. And when you're looking at vehicles, particularly bought in Australia, they're around $20,000 to $30,000 more just because they need to add in that battery into the vehicle. So for certain people that want to drive electric, that want to own an electric car, this is a really good opportunity for them to be able to continue to offset any payments possibly, or just continue to be able to afford that sustainable transport option instead of having to go to a petrol vehicle. And in turn, we're also trying to encourage this because, you know, we're also seeing energy prices across the board, whether it's petrol or electricity, to increase. So we want to try and offer a sustainable way for people to be able to drive and to be able to afford to drive electric as well.
So what does the competitive landscape look like in the area that you're rolling out, both on the car share side of things, and you mentioned that it's early in the VPP space, but how is that evolving?
Yeah, so our company is really targeting two significant growing markets. The Australian car sharing market, which is forecasted from last year from 230 million in 2022, which has increased by 13% into 2023. So, and additionally, we estimate a market opportunity of roughly about 1.3 billion in vehicle to grid sales back to the grid. So it's energy back to the grid. While we're not really the first car sharing company, we will differentiate ourselves by focusing on electric vehicles, which offers more of a sustainable, cost-effective solution compared to traditional petrol-based vehicles. Now, keeping that in mind, we've identified other car sharing companies that can operate petrol-based cars that may have been expensive, with rental prices based on mileage that cost up to roughly 45 cents, if not more, per mile. And we've also seen other EV-only rental companies, but they mainly just offer high-end vehicles like Teslas, which roughly cost $300 a day. And really, none of these car sharing solutions are not looking toward creating an energy solution. They're not evolving their own business. And our company offers a more affordable, accessible solution for individuals who are interested in driving electric vehicles.
So on the car sharing side of the business, the value proposition is, okay, you're going to provide these consumers this ability to offset their expense of owning these vehicles and so forth. You're differentiating in the marketplace. Now, is there differentiation on the price point as well in terms of like where other people are? Because there's a revenue model there, right? There's a business model for consumers where they're going to get a percentage of the revenue by contributing their vehicle. How do you guys compare relative to the other car share models out there?
So, like we said before, we've seen most electric car models here in Australia generally sit between 300 and up per day for a rental vehicle, and they focus on pretty much a luxury tier of electric vehicles. Now, we want to flip that model, and we want to focus on the low end of that model. So your Nissan Leafs, maybe some of your Kias that are coming out here next year. We really want to focus our attention there because once you have that part of the market, you're able to offer rental cars that are electric vehicles. You'll grab more of the market because they're cheap, they're more accessible to most of the people, essentially. And so we want to tier ourselves to roughly about $150 per day for the car share portion. And then also those cars will be vehicle to grid, so we'll sell electricity when they're not using it, and we'll give the revenue back to the owner, and Swan will take a cut of that, essentially.
And just on top of that as well, conventional car sharing, even if they're petrol, as Colin mentioned before, they're usually based on mileage. So what you see when you rent out a vehicle, although they might be sub $100 a day, once you start doing longer distances, it really becomes a lot more expensive, and the price really builds because of the revenue model that they've got. Whereas with, I guess, having the electric option, it's such a cheap per mile cost that we're really able to bring that price down for a whole day rental for those kinds of distances as well.
Are there any other car sharing model businesses out there that have models that have either announced that they're moving down the path to the selling electricity back to the grid, or are already doing it?
No is the short answer. We see lots of talk with, government kind of think tanks and things, but there's no company that's really talked about it at all. Even our EV only car shares in Australia, they've not really talked about it. Again, because they're focusing on those higher end vehicles that are not able or don't allow for that kind of capability. So we're really just seeing car sharing models stick to that business model where we want to really try and extract the most value out of these vehicles to be able to take that 60% utilization rate, a conservative 60%, which is on average for our car rentals in Australia, and really turn that into 100% utilization rate for our vehicles that are on our network.
And we're in a very interesting time because as some other car sharing models might have electric vehicles, I don't believe, or we don't believe they're actually looking beyond that to create the energy power solution. The whole vehicle to grid scenario, as far as a commercial standpoint, is relatively new. So right now, we really have the opportunity to jump in and get ahead on that game.
So what do the economics look on the car sharing side of the business? You're going to have certain amount of cars that are in your fleet that you own, that you've purchased, you acquired outright, so forth. And there's going to be other cars that are going to be contributed through third parties. What does the revenue mix and revenue split look like on that side of the equation? And then once you do get to a point where you're starting to roll out the V2G side of the business, what do the economics look like on that front?
Yeah. So the first 12 months is really about proving this model can work, essentially. So we want to raise roughly about 3.5 initially for our seed round, and that will allow us to buy roughly 50 cars, develop fully out our VPP platform that we've been designing, make it commercially available, easy to access, and then on top of that, adding the car share portion, which we've already designed outwards, essentially. And then going into year 2 and then to year 3, essentially, we want to raise our vehicles. So we'll have roughly about 200 vehicles that we will own ourselves, and then we'll be onboarding about 120 more peer-to-peer vehicles within that second to third year going forward. Going into the 5th year of that process, we'll be generally self-generating revenue. So we'll be able to generate a lot more revenue to put it back in to be able to expand our fleet, but also to expand our reach into other cities, essentially, and grab those peer-to-peer people. And the whole model about Swan is about grabbing the community, essentially, and pulling them into us. And we really, really believe that's the best way to scale something. Because the customer is going to want a vehicle for themselves. So we want to give them the option either, hey, look, we can make money on the electricity side or the car share side. And so it's kind of a self-feeding model in itself. So once we get to that year 3 and then going into 5, it's just going to be like self-feeding essentially the whole way. So you give back, but then you also take. And the take portion is like a little bit of revenue here for us, some electricity cuts, and then the give back is giving back capital for taking energy, essentially.
So if I contribute my vehicle, right, to your fleet on any given week or month or whatever schedule that there is, I can make a decision then to say, okay, you guys can go ahead and you know, rent my car out, and then I'm going to get a percentage of those revenues. Am I obliged at that point to also let you use my battery for selling electricity back, or is that sort of an additional option with additional potential revenue that I can generate on that front?
It's an additional option that you can actually create, like you said, Todd. It's basically you'll flip a switch in the application, and the application will be like, would you like to use this for revenue generating purposes, vehicle to grid purposes? And it'll pop up yes or no, confirm that you agree to terms and agreement on that. And then going forward, whenever you plug that vehicle in, right, there'll be a slide bar that goes left and right. It's like, hey, look, yes or no, I would like to do this. If it's yes, and then at peak times throughout the day when energy is actually very profitable on the AEMO, which is the Australian energy market, essentially, which is a slightly different market than the retail side. We'll take that battery, essentially, and we'll sell it back at wholesale value, getting the most value or most bang for your buck at that point in time. And we've also integrated in our forecast, we're not going to sell electricity from your battery when it's not profitable for you, the individual vehicle.
So do I have am I with that application that you're talking about, is there like some sort of alarm that says, okay, hey, we're hitting peak hours, or is it just sort of, is that just part of, something that's in the sort of the fine print of whatever agreement that I signed that says, okay, under X, Y, and Z conditions, you're basically authorizing us to go ahead and deploy the V2G model with your car?
It's a bit of both, so essentially. So you'll see a graph essentially that kind of shows you where the peak times to charge your vehicle throughout the day are. So it more like incentivizes you, hey, to plug in at that certain time. When the car is plugged in, that is a self-automated process. And the reason it's being self-automated process is that if you're somebody plugs in at the wrong time of day, like, I want to sell back to the grid, you're actually might sell where it's a worse time for you to sell. You're actually not making any money at all. So, and we don't really want to leave that open to just guessing, essentially. We really want to have the mathematics behind that, and also looking at the energy market and have that automated where it's splits of a second, that are doing these calculations, not just random pushing the buttons.
Yeah, exactly. Our goals with the owner and with Swan are certainly aligned in terms of trying to profit and get the most value out of this electric vehicle that you have. So that's the idea about automating it. Obviously, we're not going to drain the battery completely. We want to leave, and we'll leave the option open on, hey, we want to leave 40% because I want to drive here, or you might say, don't touch it at all tomorrow because I've got this thing planned. That's certainly possible, but I guess the idea is that we want to, as Colin has hinted at, we want to really get the most value out because at the end of the day, this car is sitting around for 5% of the time, and you have this whole battery that's not being used. You might travel on average 30 kilometers a day. That's the average for Australia. You have another 270 300 kilometers battery that's not being used. So why not use the battery at its biggest capacity for you as well? Yeah.
And as a consumer, would I have any potential concerns about, okay, I mean, you mentioned that you're basically going to leave a certain reserve capacity in the battery, because we all know that when you cycle batteries all the way down to nothing, that really sort of accelerates, right, the lifetime, right, mortality rate, I guess, of the battery. So you're going to basically leave a reserve on the battery at hand, and should I be concerned as a vehicle owner about, okay, this is going to, there's a sort of a trade-off, right? So if I'm basically generating the extra revenue and so forth with my vehicle, both by renting it out through Swan Innovations and by selling electricity back to the grid through the VPP side of the business, are there trade-offs in terms of just battery lifetime in general that I might have that could, that I guess should be addressed or could be addressed, or is the verdict still out on that?
So I think there's a couple ways to look at this. Let me go ahead and address the elephant in the room. Yes, the more you sell the electricity, the more you pull it out of the battery, the faster it will degrade over time. But let's take a step back right now. In the past couple years, worldwide, we've had more lithium mining going on. We've had more mining in general for batteries. The cost of batteries are actually coming down, right, than they were before. So the price to replace a battery will be a lot cheaper than it is today. So, for example, if I went down to the Nissan dealership today and I wanted to replace my Nissan Leaf battery, it would cost me roughly about 5,000 Australian, essentially. But with our revenue generating model, you would pay for that in the first year, essentially. So if you wanted to replace your battery, you could, or if you needed to replace your battery, you can under this kind of power trading scheme, essentially. That's one thing on top of that. The other portion of this is that, oh man, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. Yeah.
I think the other thing to think about is that as cars are becoming more and more tech centric in terms of the technology and things that are going into the vehicle, cars are having a shorter and shorter lifespan as well. So even though it is an electric car, and there's certainly room to be able to replace, with the way that we've done our business model, you're going to see profit. You're not going to lose money from having it on the car share or from having the V2G set up on. You're still going to make money no matter what. So if you are needing to replace the battery, you would have seen already profit, whether through car sharing or through the V2G, to be able to basically pay for that. Plus, you've still profited on top. We've seen with our model, on average, you're going to be making $30 a day using the V2G as well. So, which, if you look at after 2,000 cycles for your average vehicle battery, you're going to see a lot more value in terms of what you've provided for the grid than you would have lost on having to replace that battery.
Correct. And so let's say we replace that battery going forward, right? Then we can take that battery, because let's say it has about 60% lifespan left in it, essentially fully charged. And we can actually put it somewhere and put it next to the grid. So it actually gives us the ability to grow another storage solution, as well growing the car storage solution at the same time. So we replace the battery, that vehicle gets a new battery, right, which it can operate from 0 to 100%. We take that old battery, basically recycle it, but recycle it in a sense of we'll still use the exact same battery, but now we can use it fully from 0 to 60% instead of using it from maybe 40% to 100%, because we always leave that reserve inside of that car battery. That way you can drive around if you need to, essentially. So there is a second life to these batteries that take off.
So who is your consumer? Who's the target consumer for this business? Is it? I mean, both, I guess, from a demographic and psychographic perspective. Is it college students? Is it professionals, or all of the above? What does that look like?
Yeah. So for our consumers, we're looking for individuals. One, if they want to take part with our third-party vehicles, to be able to afford to buy an electric car. But maybe these individuals find it difficult to do so. It's kind of a stretch to be able to, pay for that EV. And that's where our car sharing service can be really good in terms of for the initial network as well, and getting people on, making EVs more accessible to people to be able to buy. But then as we're looking for those lower end EVs, for more and more people to be able to drive, because as we're seeing within cities, if you have, you might not even have a car space in your apartment. You don't have any of these options to be able to own a vehicle. You want to be able to still drive electric. So they're the kinds of people that we're looking at. And with our market research that we've done, we see these usually classed as metro techs, people that might have more money to be able to spend and to be able to afford the options of sustainable transport as well. But at the end of the day, anyone that's in the car sharing market can really find value in our electric only option, because we're really going up against conventional car sharing services anyway. At the end of the day, you're seeing similar prices whether you're using our business model or using a conventional business model for petrol based car sharing. So why not use our electric vehicle only solution? And then on top of that, we're going to be looking at people that are conscious about the energy, and from the energy standpoint, from our virtual power plant standpoint or V2G standpoint, people that want to be able to provide value back to the grid and to be able to lower our dependence on conventional thermal base loads. So using our vehicles as power storage, whether from solar or wind, other renewable sources, to be able to store that battery and then be able to participate in the new electrical grid, the sustainable looking forward grid as well.
So really, you're checking the boxes, right? So from an economic standpoint, it reduces my total cost of ownership, right? And from if I'm aligned to to care about sustainability and the environment and so forth, it also you're providing an alternative and basically providing a platform that's going to offset or not offset, but just basically provide an alternative to all of that. I mean, in Australia, right, isn't coal a major, sort of contributor to the grid, and there's a mandate, I suppose, right, to move away from coal and towards more wind and solar.
Correct. Yeah. So coal is still providing 45% base load to our grid, and that's kind of where we see our vehicles being able to take a lot of that additional power during the day that might be able to be generated through renewable sources, to be able to provide that through not only nighttime, but in those peak moments where there's more grid demand. And as you mentioned, reducing ownership costs, 100%. On average, we've modeled third-party vehicles. If you were to own a vehicle, to have a utilization rate at 30%, roughly half of what a full-time vehicle would be. But if your vehicle was on our grid 100% of the time, we're really looking at profiting from having a vehicle on our system, not just reducing your ownership costs. At the end of the day, it's a business for us, but also for the person that's owning the car as well. We're turning your liability into an asset through our network, whether it's through the car sharing initially or car sharing and or energy portion in the next couple of years.
I want to jump back really quick to add in. As we have that mandate in Australia to take those coal power plants offline, what we struggle to find is an intermediate solutions in the grid that are big enough to sustain for intermediate time. So when you look at the Australian energy market power grid, essentially, when the power gets very, very, very expensive, then it becomes profitable to say turn on the highest snowy hydro, which is the hydroelectric plant, which basically dumps a bunch of water out essentially and creates electricity that way. But it's also expensive to run that, so it has to be it has to be profitable times. Get to a point where the energy curve is really, really expensive for it to turn on. So a lot of the big scale solutions have that similar issue. With this particular solution, right, since these cars will be scattered throughout the city, we can actually meet that energy curve somewhere in the middle, essentially, before those actually big energy generators turn on. And we're able to grab that middle market and kind of take profit from that. So that's kind of our utilization case. We're the solution that we can quickly turn on, essentially, give back to the grid when it's profitable for us, essentially. And it helps bring that demand curve from skyrocketing all the time on expensive days and kind of helps bring it down. So we'll just grab that middle market.
And on top of that, I just want to highlight these. We do have other solutions that could be classed as a battery. And in Australia, hydroelectricity is certainly one of those things. But once you start looking at the efficiency in terms of if you're doing both pumping and generating, running these hydropower generators can be quite inefficient. 50% roughly for being able to harness that electricity from first pumping and then generating on the back end of that. So with our system of having solid state storage for power, you can see a really large increase in efficiency as well. Yeah.
And Colin, you alluded to market sizing a little earlier in our conversation. Can you elaborate more in terms of what the market opportunity is here?
So our market opportunity roughly is like it's 1.3 billion from vehicle to grid as of this year. So when I say 1.3 opportunity, when you look at the solar panel generation to the grid right now, that opportunity is about 1.3, right? And with the growing cost of electricity, that opportunity will get a lot bigger and we will be able to grab a lot more of that market.
Yeah, currently the Australian car sharing market is valued at around 300 million per year in Australia. And obviously with our vehicle to grid and our EV option, we're going to be able to, and targeting these entry-level EVs, be really able to grab some of that market right off the bat. And the car rental industry in total in Australia as well is 1.4 billion. On top of that, I want to highlight that the battery storage industry as well in Australia continues to grow. 2022, we saw a capacity of 1.1 gigawatts, which really turned into $600 million in money for 2022. And that's continuing to grow. There is a huge roadmap for battery storage capability within Australia. And that's where we really see great value in building the network so that we can participate as well, not only in the car sharing, but also in a much more valuable battery power storage as well.
So then to recap, over the next 12 months, what does this business look like? You're going to raise how much in is this current? It's I think a Series A preferred round. How much are you looking to raise in this current round? How far does that take you before you need to bring in the next round of capital? And then where does that take you?
So we're initially going to raise 3.5 million. That's kind of our seed phase for the next 5 months. And that 12 months will allow us to put 50 cars on the grid of our own cars, and then also start to kind of generate that third-party car share option. Right there in the meantime, the moment we get that capital, we start to basically commercialize and build out the vehicle to grid application and put all the licenses in place that we need to actually do that essentially. When we get to year 2 to 3, so going on to year 2, we'll do another Series A round, which then will generate another 6 to 8 million. And that'll put us out to roughly about 200 of our own vehicles. And then at that same time, we'll have substantially a lot more peer-to-peer vehicles that are attached to our grid. Going from year 2 to 5 is when we turn on to that the vehicle to grid for our customers. So third-party vehicles, essentially. So we go from our vehicles into the third-party vehicles. And then on year 5 going forward, we're self-generating. We generate our own revenue. We can look towards other options for generating massive amounts of capital to generate maybe lots more cars. But we're self-sufficient to an extent that we can put our own cars on and still expand our grid and our network to reach our third-party people or our customers, and then perhaps expand beyond Australia, or at least all into the major cities in Australia.
Given that sort of pro forma trajectory, at what point in that sort of 5-year plan do you at all reach cash flow positive in profitability?
Year 3. Year 3 is when we're looking at profitability. Year 1 certainly is projected to be a loss. but it's really not only providing that proof of concept, but it's getting the initial fleet of vehicles on board. Year 2, we are projecting to see a minor loss around 100,000. But come year 3, that's when we've really got our full fleet from our previous year, our year 2, where we mentioned roughly 150 vehicles bringing on board, and that's when we start to see the fruits of that, certainly as well. And at that year mark as well, as Colin highlighted, when we're looking at turning on that vehicle to grid option as well, is really going to see much more value coming in to the vehicles, from the vehicles.
And is that 5-year plan, is that basically take you to a national footprint, or are you still regional in 5 years?
So that takes us to a national standpoint in a sense of, well, we have our 200 vehicles, which will be probably split between Sydney and then the local cities right here. But our peer-to-peer vehicles allows us to branch out beyond that. And since we're also self-generating, we'll be able to buy more cars than just the 200 that we bought initially for year 2, and then start buying them in Melbourne, then Brisbane, and Perth, and kind of scale that way.
Correct, yeah. Our model is really forecasted for 200 of our own vehicles. But, in year 5, we're certainly sitting on a lot of cash that we can certainly put into key areas, key cities, with our own fleet. But the peer-to-peer is really also a gateway into those, a really good gateway into certain areas of Australia as well.
You're on mute, Todd.
Yeah, Colin. Just to clarify, when you're talking about self-generating, that what you mean is cash flow positive, right? Is that okay? Correct. So from that perspective, then, and Declan, to your point, if you're cash flow positive by year 3, you're generating, a stronger revenue run rate. You've got more cash on the balance sheet and so forth. At that point, expansion capital, if you really sort of want to accelerate the model, either within Australia or even expand abroad, then we're looking at more sort of a mezzanine kind of structures. You're actually in a position to basically capitalize some of that growth through debt, in addition to your own cash flow. So it's not necessarily perpetual dilution from a shareholder perspective.
Yeah, correct. Look, we certainly want to be doing at that point what's best for the business, whether that's for both our customers and our shareholders as well. So I'm not really going to say what we're going to be doing in that time frame, the year 5 time frame, because to get to that point, there's still quite a lot of ducks that we need to get in a row, from the car sharing and really trying to make that work, getting the vehicle to grid to work. But we still want to continue to position ourselves as being a part of the community, yes, bringing benefit to these individuals that are owning vehicles and putting them on our network, and scaling to cities and areas that's in everyone's best interest. So certainly those options are going to be available, whether it's through the mezzanine financing, as you mentioned. But at the end of the day, yeah, we certainly want to just really make sure that we've got our business footing correct before we start thinking about and really not only diluting ourselves from a shares perspective, but also from capital perspective as well. We want to make sure that it's working, it's community focused, and it's really bringing benefit to everyone involved.
So in terms of key takeaways, what do you want to leave the audience with in terms of just key points that that you think really need to be emphasized or re-emphasized about Swan Innovations?
Definitely. Electric vehicle car sharing, empowering new customers and existing car share communities to switch to electric vehicles, really maximizing vehicle utilization from 5% close to 100%. Large-scale energy solution storage for vehicle to fleets, and really providing a sustainable way for individuals to make money.
All right, now just to circle back around, why did you guys start Swan Energy or Swan Innovations?
Yeah, sure. So we really saw the uptake of electric vehicles really slow in Australia. We saw the government providing assistance, but this assistance is really large scale and it's not benefiting individuals as well. So it really continued to slow down this uptake of electric vehicles. And we really wanted to get a way to lower that threshold to be able to afford EVs, to be able to drive electric. And as we started to see rising energy costs, we saw that there was an opportunity in electric vehicles where we saw how much vehicles are being used on average, that there's really such value in these vehicles to be able to use not only for driving, but also for energy. So we really wanted to just have this method of giving back to people as much as possible through transport as we see higher and higher populations, less and less options to be able to own electric vehicles, and then also to be able to put power back into people's hands and to be able to really, give these people opportunity in being more energy independent as well.
Yeah, it kind of hit on that last point too. We wanted an option for people that they could create money without actually having to work for it, like physical working capital. So therefore, it becomes more like an asset or like a stock that kind of generates revenue and increases in value over time. It's all about giving back to the people, right? Yes, it is a business for us too at the same time, but at the heart is it's finding ways to give capital back to people and bring people on with that journey, bring them on board with us.